So, broad terms, Ian, we spoke to you before the first test, and it flattered to deceive in a big way. You were hopeful the Lions could, or sorry, the Australians could muster up something, and they really didn't. But second test has just kind of salvaged this tour in a very big way. I think it was just a great test match.
Yeah, very much so. And I think my predictions for the first test played out in the second test. And I think look, Valentini and Skelton made a big difference getting Australia back to the gain line, and over it. And then that gave the space to Ikitau and Suolihi to then get on a front foot ball. Whereas in the first half they were running against Lions brick walls. Um, but yeah, look, it was a great test match on Saturday, and while I was delighted to see the Lions win, I would have loved to have seen it to go to a third test decider. And yeah, there's so much in that game to break down, and as you quite often find in these really big test matches, we you end up questioning the rules. And I think with Sheehan's try and the breakdown at the end, it does put the rules under a microscope, and they are ever changing in world rugby.
Well, we're going to go there first. Rud, first of all, give us an overview.
Yeah, it was. You're right, Joe. It kind of validated the entire exercise. It was everything you want from a Lions Test match. It's a pity it came in the week two, because it's suddenly the Australians are very interested because it's on the back page. It's knocked the NRL off the news cycle. It's everything Australia wanted from this whole exercise, because it was 90. It was the biggest crowd I've ever been in. I've never been to a stadium with 90,000 people in it. It was a proper historic sporting event, and the game lived up to it in every way. It had the drama, it had the excitement. I've just been watching it back there. I mean, that Tom Wright try off the Suolihi break, that was such an electric moment in the stadium, and I'm sure for everyone watching back home, all the people who've watched all the tour games, it was a payoff for the entire thing. And Jac Conan said it in the mix zone afterwards. It was way better to win it that way than if they'd won by 20 or 30 points. And it was everything you want to see. Like, one of the things, I find it very sad that Australia are not at the top table anymore. When you're traveling around here, this should be a behemoth of rugby. It's got the athlete, it's got the infrastructure. It just doesn't have the kind of organization, and it has too many rivals, and it's fading. But like, they've still got great players. And I couldn't understand some of the narrative back home about them going to win by 40 or 50 points. That's not how test match rugby works. First game, yeah, it was a bit of a non-event, but this was everything we could have expected, and the drama was incredible at the end. And Ian's right. Like, I've written a piece today. I think Andrew Piardi was in an impossible position, because if he'd given the penalty and ruled out the Lions try, it was probably the right decision. And yet I think it was the right decision to do what he did, if that makes any sense at all. Like, there was so many offences at that ruck, and the technique that players are coached, like Jac Morgan did what he coached to do. He admitted he thought he might be illegal as well, even though he's doing everything he's supposed to do. So it's all the flaws of rugby in one incident. And for the second Lions tour in three, we spent the last minute of a really important match watching the referee look at a big screen and trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah. Well, let's take our time and tease it out, because in some respects, the more you tease it out, the more complicated it becomes. I do have a clip of Farrell and Schmidt giving their view on this clear out. So I'm sure anybody who's seen the game knows, but if you didn't for any reason, this is right at the death, the moments before Hugo Keenan's try. Jac Morgan clears out Carlo Tizzano, who is, in effect, he's and we'll come to the referee Pirardi. He says they arrived at the same time. They clearly didn't. So Tizzano is in, and he's getting over the ball, and he's in position, and in comes Morgan and gets him. Well, whether it's above the shoulder or on the shoulder is probably all important. So to give a sense of the fallout, the Sydney Sunday Telegraph have the back page headline, "Robbed. Referee ruins our shot at history with series deciding missed penalty." So it has become the big story. Rugby Australia CEO Phil Waugh has very much backed Joe Schmidt, said this was absolutely an illegal clear out on Jac Morgan's part. So here is Farrell, followed by Schmidt in the press conferences afterwards. And there's an inaudible question to Schmidt. He's asked at one point, how do you think the officials missed it? But we'll start with Farrell. And by the way, Initially, there's a little giggle in the press conference. You could think he's sort of joking here or being facetious, as in I would say this anyway. He's not. He's been absolutely serious when he's asked about Morgan's clear-out.
I thought it was a brilliant clear-out. Did you? I thought it was a brilliant. Yeah. Honestly, it depends which side of the fence you come from. I would have thought so. I can understand, people's opinions, but I thought Jac was brilliant when he came on, and so were the rest of the bench.
Yeah, I think everyone can make their own decision on that. You just have to read Law 9.20, and I guess you just have to listen to the description from the referee and then watch the vision. When two players are described as arriving at the same time, just watch the footage.
How can an official or a bunch of officials get that wrong?
Because they're human. Players make errors. Match officials make errors. Our perspective is we felt it was a decision that doesn't really live up to the big player safety push that they're talking about. You cannot hit someone above the level of the shoulders, and there's no bind with the left arm, the hands on the ground. So that's what we've seen, and we've watched a number of replays from different angles, and so it is what it is. We just have to accept it.
You can start in several places here. I'm just going to quickly just put Law 15.3 to bed because that's been talked about as well. And so that states that players involved at a ruck have to have their head and shoulders no lower than their hips. And that kind of happens at every breakdown going. And Tiziano had his head lower than his hips here and his shoulders lower than his hips. So technically, if you want to get super technical about it, even though it happens at almost every breakdown, you could have said Tiziano was in an illegal position to begin with. No one's debating that. We're on to Law 9.20, as Joe Schmidt said, Ian. So, Law 0.20, a player must not make contact with an opponent above the line of the shoulders. The strongest argument I've seen in favour of Jac Morgan is he got him about at shoulder level, not neck first. The real contact came at shoulder level. Your reading on it all?
Yeah, like, as you said, there's so much in it. I think to start off, Joe was always factual and he's very measured, and it's backed up by the rules. And I remember when he came in as Leinster coach, he put a rule book in everyone's position, and we had to read it and we had to know the rules. And it's amazing how you still see players getting it wrong. The ref being wrong is the players didn't arrive at the same time. Okay, so Tiziano has won the space, and that is really, really important here. And that's where I think that the rules could change going forward, where as opposed to the first person being able to latch, the first person entering the ruck can only counter ruck. And once they've won the space, then the second player in from the defensive team can poach the ball. And that's where we're seeing a huge amount of injuries in rugby at the moment. They're high impact. The players are very exposed, and you're getting shoulder injuries, and you're also getting injuries around the hip. We're seeing players blowing out their hamstrings because there's so much force coming through their upper back through into their pelvis, their wide stance. We saw obviously Dan Levy's one, and they've tried to tweak the rules there where players can't land on the legs of players. So it would be very interesting to see what World Rugby do. You can see with Joe Schmidt, it's backed up by the rules. Okay, so he's saying specifically that there wasn't a wrap. That's a bit of a grey area because his arms are very much up and there is an attempt to wrap, but the impact is definitely above the shoulder line on the top of the neck or the neck area. And that's where it comes down to. Did he win the space? Did he get hit on the neck? And for Joe, that's straightforward.
Was there a little bit of an argument, though, that the real impact, obviously his neck is touched because it's connected to his shoulder, but there is a bit of an argument that the brunt of the force from Morgan was on the shoulder line? No?
I thought it was more neck area, my initial reaction. But that then brings into the question of head below hips, and that's a rule that it's there in rugby, but it's not refereed. And that's the same when you're carrying the ball, Joe. You have to keep your head above your hips, but you can see now especially on quick taps close to the try line, you're seeing players now. Dan Sheehan's one's a different one, but we've also seen him do this. You tap the ball and you're trying to get as close to the try line as possible, but you're seeking the ground, and your nose is literally trailing against the grass. So it's impossible for your head to be above your hips in that situation. It's not refereed, and that's where we do see these rules from time to time. They're in the rule book, but they're not you know, the same with the escorting for the high kick contest. That was always in the rules, but it was how it was refereed.
Yeah.
And maybe we will see off the back of this that players have to have their head above their hips when they're carrying the ball and also when they're at the breakdown.
Because I saw, and we'll come to Dan Sheehan's in a moment, Rob Debney in the London Times, the former test referee, and he has far more of a problem with the Dan Sheehan try, by the way. So what he said, Rory, was, we're talking about fine lines here. I think on balance, I would have let the Morgan clear-out go. If you disallow that try, then every breakdown becomes fair game and we no longer have a game of rugby. And that's what Ian's saying as well. There are the laws, and then there are how they are applied. And I heard a lot of former players sort of saying, look, whatever with the laws, whatever's in the laws, I just know if you disallow that clear out, then the game's gone. That was one of the big refrains.
Yeah, I don't know if the game's gone, but you know, like if Hugo Keenan doesn't beat Len Ikitau and we go through 2 or 3 more phases, we're never going back looking at that one. It's not a piece of foul play that warrants a yellow card. It's a rugby, like I don't like the phrase rugby incident, but it is a rugby incident. It's a guy trying to win a penalty for his team, being blown away by a guy desperate to keep the ball alive. Tizzano tries to milk it. I mean, if he gets hit in the neck, why is he grabbing his head and like putting his hand out there? And I don't really have a problem with him doing that, because he's trying to draw the referee's attention to what he thinks is illegal act, in what is an act of desperation to try and save this game that they've put so much into. I thought Piardi handled it incredibly well. I thought he took his time. He got both of the captains away from him. He drew breath. He watched it, I think, 8 or 9 times, and he came down on the side that this is just what happens at breakdowns, and the act wasn't illegal enough in an area that is always illegal. You could go back to watch a couple of the James Ryan clearouts in the build-up, you know, a couple of phases back, and they're lethal, like, but they're not. They're definitely not. Some of them are not legal, but like you can't. That's the ruck, unless it's spotted at the time. And the ref is completely on it. I think going back and watching it, you're going to end up chalking off nearly every try because the ruck beforehand, there's something wrong. Like Tizzano comes in from the side at the start of it as well. Like, so there's all sorts wrong with it.
And what about the point though Ian made that like Tizzano's in first, you know, possession 9/10 of the law.
Yes,
he won the space. Priority saying they arrived at the same time is bizarre.
Yeah, well, that'll definitely annoy Joe. Like I wouldn't. If we were having the same discussion and Piardi had come down with a different decision, I'd still be praising him for the way he handled it, and I wouldn't have a problem with the decision. I thought it was ultimately a 50-50, and the referee was let down by a law book that leaves it so open to interpretation.
Okay.
And another referee in the same scenario is going to gives a penalty against. And like if Piardi had a bit of a feel for the series and was a bit of a marketing operator, he would have gone, let's get this to Sydney.
Sure.
You know, I'd say, you know, like he had more probably incentive to do that in terms of the game, and that wasn't part of his thinking. And I remember in the URC final that he did, and he's a referee that I think both camps were really stressed about him coming into it. I thought he had an excellent game.
Okay.
I thought he let this game flow. If you have a game this good, the referee has to play a part in it. In the URC final, there was that kind of gouging incident or a kind of alleged gouge by a Bulls player, and obviously it was in Croke Park. It was a big booze and everything, and he took his time. And I thought in that case, he arrived at the right decision as well. He's very inexperienced. That's been very much highlighted by the Australian media. It's a big game for him to do. I just think the game left him in an impossible position. He handled it as well as he could, and he made the decision he thought was right. And I thought the way he took his time to do it and explained it, you're right, he didn't get there. To be honest, I'm just not a fan of the jackal as a thing. I think it's too dangerous. And when I was first playing under 20s about 20 years ago, we were coached to put your foot over the ball before you went for a poach. I think you should have to step over the ruck. If you can get your foot over there and stabilize yourself, then you're in a position to pick up the ball. Otherwise, you just counter ruck. I just don't think that position, like we've seen it with the Dan Levy injury is the one I always come back to. The Jackling player is too exposed. And now that the croc roll is out of the game, which is right because the croc roll was dangerous and was leading to lower limb injuries, like Jac Morgan, that was the only thing he could do, or else he was giving up the possession, giving up the game. And I can tell you what Andy Farrell would say to him in the video review room on a Monday if he hadn't thundered into it and blown him out.
Yeah, and let's finish on that then. So we're agreed it's a super fine margin, this specific one. But Ian, you raised the issue of injuries, and Rudd did there as well. Like, this is going back forever. The Dan Levy one's a good example. I vividly remember, like a long time ago, I think it's Sean O'Brien. It was an Irish player anyway, but like over the ball.
Paul O'Connell at
And
the World Cup.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, O'Connell's injury as well. But no, this is just one where he's over the ball, and it's like he's there, he's standing over, he's got his hands on it, and the referee allows certainly 2, if not 3, like attempts to smack him. You know, like to just like literally swan dive at his back, and he stays over the ball. And I think after the second one, he looked at the ref as if to say, "How many more times are you going to let someone smash into my upper back neck here before you give the penalty?" And anyone who just has a casual interest in rugby who will now watch that replay of Morgan being allowed to smash into Tizano's, let's call it shoulders, neck, whichever, that's even like on the menuing is a crazy scenario. It's so dangerous.
It is, and like a lot of the time I'll road test what I'm going to say in this podcast with some of my friends who are like back rows and love the game, and they love the art of poaching. And these are guys saying to me, no, you need to have that in the game. But my argument is that if the first defending player comes in and he can only counter ruck, right, you then have a genuine contest over the ball without having shoulders and hips and knees exposed. If you then win that space, the next player coming in can poach the ball, and you're not going to have these massive collisions where players are running in from 10 meters, the velocity's out of control. And look, it is you know, if you're a really good poacher and this rule change comes in, it goes against you. But that happens with rugby. Certain rules will suit certain players. Like the escorting rule, for example, has gone against Marcus Smith playing full back because he's one of the shorter guys. It favors taller guys now. It's the same thing at the breakdown. Maybe if this rule did come in, you might go with more physical number 7s as opposed to specific poachers. But overall, will the game be safer if they do make the suggested rule change that we're talking about? I absolutely think it will, and it is such a big challenge for rugby at the moment.
Yeah, okay.
You know.
Don't want to spend all day talking referees. So last refereeing decision of significance is the Dan Sheehan try where he kind of dives over from close range. It was very striking on TV. Rog said, that's not allowed. And then, you know, Miles Harrison kept commentating, and Dan Bigger came in first and said, oh, see, look, it's not like in the Six Nations where someone, you know, there was the famous example was at Blair Murray where tackle was hurdled, but that was much further out the pitch. And Bigger said, well, in the act of scoring a try, you can go in the air, therefore it's allowed. What Rob Debney said in the London Times was, and I pretty much agree with this, he says, the simple fact is, I think Sheehan has dived from too far out to define that as in the act of scoring a try. I would definitely have disallowed it. It just failed the eye test. It looked wrong. You are not allowed to jump out of a tackle and Sheehan soared Superman style over 2 would-be wallaby tacklers. So that point, fellas, about just how far out he dove from being key there in Debney's eyes. Where are you in the Sheehan try-in?
Similar to the Sulehi one, it didn't look right in the first test. You know, he's holding on the ground. Jack Conan's poaching, and then he gets the try over the line. But there's no offside in the in-goal area. So is he holding on? Isn't he? Was he holding on before the try line? It didn't look right, and it wasn't right, and it was correctly overruled. Sheehan's one. He's tapped the ball. He goes aerial. How can you stop him? You are not allowed to tackle people in the air. How do you stop that? So every time now going forward, you could just in theory tap and go and jump over the line. It's really dangerous. Again, comes back to the safety of the game, and that's where the referee has that discretion. If it is dangerous play, he can overrule it. And maybe Piardi in that instance has gone, I don't think it is dangerous. The Aussie guys were already on the ground. I personally do think it is. And I think quite often with great players, we saw the Dupont rule coming in. I think we're going to see the Sheehan rule coming in. If it's a 5-meter tap, you cannot dive for the line from that distance out if there's players in front of you. I don't know how it will be worded, but it'll be something along those lines.
Rud?
Yeah, my gut in the stadium at the time was that doesn't look right. And he did exactly what Ian had talked about earlier. About 10 seconds beforehand, he tapped the penalty and did that 3-meter dash to the ground to set up a pre-planned move with Andrew Porter coming around the side. So the Australians were expecting the same thing. So that's why they were so low. So he'd almost kind of baited them into going low. And they go so low. One of them has his knee on the ground. And I'm pretty sure he's done this before. I can't think of the specific example, but I guess he scored so many tries. But it didn't look that unfamiliar to me, but it didn't feel right. Like I thought the other one that was wrong was the Jac Gordon try. I thought Piardi kind of ran interference for him on Andrew Porter, but yeah, like that's probably, that's maybe that's 1-1 and it all comes down to the Tizano call. But ultimately, like, I don't think the referee, even though we've talked about it for ages, because it is interesting, and the laws and the vagaries of these laws is interesting. But I don't think that's the winning and losing of the game ultimately, because I think the winning and the losing game was the Lions, the Wallabies not having 80 minutes in them, losing all their big guns and making bad decisions, and the Lions just staying true to what they believe in and playing unbelievable rugby to win it to death.
Okay, well, let's get into the specifics of that then. So they're the two kind of big talking points from refereeing point of view post-match. This is, for the record, by the way, the greatest Lions comeback in history. Before Saturday, it was 1938 against South Africa when the Lions were 10 points down. So 18 points down after half an hour. A reminder of the kind of cadence of how it all went. 2 early penalties, 6-0 Australia. Sheehan scored his try to bring it back to 6-5. And then there was that period where Australia scored 3 tries in 7 minutes. Slipper, Gordon, and that electric right try on the half-hour mark. And suddenly it's 23-5. You feel it's kind of crucial that the Lions hit back the way they did. 2 tries just before half-time. Curry and then Jones. And suddenly it was 6 points at the break. Valentini went off, Skelton went off, then 7 minutes into the second half, and all Australia managed in the second half was a line of penalty. The Byrne try on the hour mark. I know James Lowe has kind of been talked about as a quiet tour for him, but like brilliant fend off and pass for the Byrne try, and then of course Keenan at the death. So in that kind of point Rory makes, if you wanted a short version of the game, it does really feel like Valentini back, Skelton back, just like a kind of a heft to everything Australia did. And when those two guys went off and the Lions threw their bench on, Australia were in a race with the clock a little bit. Could they be reeled in?
Yeah, and like I flagged it kind of before the first test, the experience that the Lions have coming off the bench. You know, you look at the names there, and you've got you know, Genge, who's playing the best rugby of his life. Kinghorn, who was the Six Nations Player of the Year. Farrell with over 100 England caps. I thought Morgan was excellent when he came on. Now, that had that decision at the end gone against him, we probably would have changed, you know, our view of his performance. And I thought James Ryan got through a colossal amount of work when he came on. You compare that to the Aussie bench. Outside of Angus Bell, he's the only real genuine world-class guy. And then they took the risk of going 6-2, which actually really went against them when Harry Potter goes off and you've got to put McDermott on the wing. As well as McDermott played, he's a scrum half playing on the wing at a top-level test game. And it went against them because they were leaky in the air. And then even defensively, when Jones gets that try, you know, Harry Potter's there. He's probably getting his shoulder into the guts of Jones and stopping him. Now it was impending that the Lions were most likely going to score, but a big improvement that the Aussies made in this game was, especially in the first half, and throughout the game, the Lions had to work really hard for their tries, even though they got them, and they were very good in the 22, and the Lions got access into the 22. They typically did come away with points, but the Aussies made them work really, really hard for that, and that's important because in Test 1, the Lions are heading back over halfway line going, that wasn't that hard. In Test 2, they knew it was really difficult. I think the key time there's a couple of key moments in the game. The Aussies had the momentum and they really made hay with it. Those 3 quick tries. And then at 18 points up, you're going, right, they really need to manage this kind of remaining 10 minutes of the half, because even if they can go in 12, 13 points up, that's reward for how well they've played in that first half. But they got really cagey. They played inside themselves. And even though it didn't come to anything, the final play of the game, if you're on the Lions team there, that is such an energizer for you, because you're just getting this feeling that the opposition are holding on for dear life. They don't have the confidence to play. They're tired. And within that, it was funny looking at it. Like Joe Schmidt brought in taking quick taps, quick 50-meter restarts, quick taps to touch. And Johnny really took it on board. And for Johnny to, I'm certain that Johnny would have brought this in and told Finn Russell, gone through the footage and gone, there's opportunities to catch the Aussies on the hop here. And they did it 3 times with either quick kicks to touch, where they made huge distance, or the quick 50-meter goal line restarts. And that would have driven Joe demented, because he prides himself on those kind of easy wins. Don't let the ball bounce, get set, always have your eyes on the opposition, etc. And then the big one for me in the second half, that Aussie attack. Like, quite often we see this in sport where a team goes, a distance ahead, and 18 points is a distance. Momentum will always swing when it's 2 high quality sides, and it did, and the Lions got themselves back into it. But when you've climbed the kind of mountain there, how much energy do you have left? Typically, the momentum is going to swing again. And with the way rugby is, with the advantage of a restart, you do get a big advantage. And they make this break, and it was glorious down the right-hand side. McRae showed incredible nous to know where the space was, to bounce back off his right foot, find Sualihi in the middle of the field. And Tom Curry comes up with the moment of the series. That tackle, they're going to score there, either in that phase of play or very shortly after. I do believe, had they had scored there, I think they go on and win.
Yeah, I think O'Gara said that's the test series potentially there, that Curry tackle. It was brilliant. Rory, certainly the feeling watching on TV, and actually, sorry, I could be influenced by the fact I only saw this on Sunday. I had a strange weekend, so I knew the result, so it was doubly so. But for that first half, with 70% possession, 5-1 line breaks, you've only missed 6 tackles to the Lions' 17, to go in 3 tries apiece and within 1 score, I think both dressing rooms would have had a sense. That's a great result for the Lions. Lions would have been feeling very good about that result halftime.
Yeah, but I think you go back to when they were, what was it, 18 points ahead. The Lions had been 17 points ahead the week previously, and it felt completely different. It felt done a week previously, whereas you knew the Lions would mount a comeback of some sort, and it was whether the Wallabies could add just enough distance, and that moment, the Suaalii moment, was the moment. Because if they just got that 1 extra score ahead, it's not like the Lions butchered a couple of opportunities before Keenan's try, which added to the drama of it, but it actually could have been more comfortable. The last 20 minutes, they were so superior and they were so on top, but they just couldn't get it done, which was great in terms of the way the whole thing flowed. I think the weakness at 9-10 compared to the Lions, particularly 10, like Lions just not ready. He did a lot of good stuff on front football, but dropping that restart, the high ball, like dead to the scrum, those are the moments. And it may seem harsh to blame him. I thought it was strange that he stayed on for 80 minutes. They had a 10 on the bench. Maybe Joe was overly paranoid about if he brought on Ben Donaldson and another back got injured, he wouldn't have had cover. But I just thought Donaldson's more experienced. He played well against the Lions when he was playing for Western Force in week 1. Yeah, he's not Joe's guy, but he could have changed the picture, added something different. See, he'd been watching in the stands for an hour. If he's on for the last 20 minutes, he might see some space, and there was space. Bundy Aki was absolutely gone. I mean, he had an unbelievable last 20 minutes, but he was cramping up. The last time we saw Aki at 13, it was in Rome, and Italy cut him to shreds. And I'm not sure, Farrell may have been defending at 13, but he's not fast either, and he just played 80 minutes on the Tuesday. But they never once got outside them and got Suaalii into a bit of space. And there were opportunities now that were from very, very long range, but they went for the box because they were trying to see it out rather than go, hang on. There was one stage where Finn Russell wandered over and stood right beside Hugo Keenan on the right-hand side for a right-hand side box kick. And the widest outside defender for the Lions was at the near post. And the Wallabies had a full backline formation. And 2 passes, they were gone. And they were on the edge of their own 22, and there were 3 or 4 points up. So I'm not saying it's the obvious thing to do, but sometimes you got to be brave, and sometimes you got to play to the space to try and win the test match. So the Lions, they overwhelmed them really, and they did it in the style that very much reminded me of Ireland at their pomp in 2022 and 2023, with that high volume attack, kind of keeping the ball alive, a lot of kind of forwards backs interchange, keep coming. And the game, and I'm sorry to bring up a bad memory for Ian, but the game really reminded me of the 2013 Ireland All Blacks game, and Ryan Crotty at the death, because it just had the same feel. And I bumped into Owen Toolan, the Wallabies assistant coach, who was an Ireland analyst on that day, and he said, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying, like it felt like that for him as well. That was the lowest point of his career, and it felt like it happened again. So
well,
I'm sure Joe had an eerie reminiscence of that as well.
The bench just lended itself to that. Overwhelm is a good word. You looked at that bench, and they were just. I mean, it's just endless. The strength and depth. Proof that we don't indulge in scoreboard journalism here. It was incorrect not to take the drop goal. Incorrect.
I was shouting on this. I was sitting beside Chris Jones and Tom English, and I was saying they got to drop, and it never once did either of the out halves in Russell and Owen Farrell, neither of them looked in any way interested in it. It wasn't on their mind. They wanted to win with a try, and they weren't going to drop into the pocket because there was absolutely, like, I mean, Ian can talk through the strategy, but like there was a ruck underneath the posts, and all they had to do was slow it down, put their foot in the ball. Owen Farrell drops in, and game over. And what a story that would have been. I mean, I prefer the Hugh McGeenan story, but like, what a story that would have been.
Ian, nothing will convince me it was the right decision to not take the drop there. I worked out for them, but you just got to pop it over.
No, and the difference between a ruck on the 22 versus a ruck on the 5 meter and the likelihood of a drop goal going over, the percentages are very different. When you're, let's say, 30 meters out and you've got people set running at you, I'm not saying it's 50-50, but it'd be in and around that, versus a ruck on the 5 meter. I think it's probably 85-90%. We're talking about the best out halves in the world here, Finn Russell and Farrell. Like, you'd like to think they're getting probably 95% of them over. Yeah, it's a hard one to explain. Were the Lions practicing a drop goal strategy during the week? Probably not, off the back of how the first test went. They probably didn't think that they would have needed it. And yeah, you're just in the flow of the game, and they both probably felt, look, we can get a try here, and the momentum was certainly with them. But yeah, it's hard not to get away from the ease of a drop goal there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't understand this modern reluctance, and we would be in a parallel universe listening to Andy Farrell saying, listen, I trust the players, they sense them, blah, all that kind of stuff that we hear after these moments, but it doesn't stack up. It just doesn't. I really don't get it.
It also kind of goes back to the Leinster La Rochelle game, and when Leinster didn't go for have a drop goal strategy that day, and it came down to a ruck penalty, wasn't it? Alatoa got sent off for coming in on the prop, and he made a meal of it as well. The only thing, I guess, and maybe they were thinking, is there was still a minute on the clock. So if you nail a drop goal, Australia have a kickoff, and they've got unbelievable kickoff chasers. Suoli goes up, wins a kickoff, and what happens in Twickenham happens again, potentially. But to be honest, yeah, and by scoring the try, it was over. There was only 55 seconds on the clock, 50 seconds on the clock. So Russell could take his time with the conversion and win it. So maybe it was too early for the drop goal. But if Desano got that poach, or if they got that penalty, I know we'd be talking about drop goals.
Yeah. Jerry Gus got somewhere where he's going, what? I mean, come on,
But I asked Farrell, but he said, like, Finn doesn't do them. He's only ever dropped one goal in his entire professional career.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, in a run-of-the-mill fixture against Bath. He's never done it in clutch moments, whereas Farrell has. So I think it would more likely been Farrell to do it.
Yeah, no, I take if it was just Russell, no problem. I understand it's not really something he does. Weirdly, by the way, because you would think it should be no problem to him. But with Farrell on that close, I don't know. Really, it's interesting. Do you know what's striking as well, fellas? I mean, not to turn this into what might this mean for Ireland necessarily, but it was very striking that independently of each other, Jack Conan, with a couple of cans of Guinness in the tunnel, talking to journalists high on life, he kind of cracked a joke that he, getting a little bit used to coming out the wrong side of these close run last minute games, and on the pitch. Dan Sheehan on Sky Sports was saying in far less of a jokey way, he was saying, like, I've been involved in a lot of these kind of games lately, and I kind of think is that the first one I've actually won? He was almost trying to think to himself, I think that's the first one I've won. So for quite a few of these Leinster players, that is a much needed under the gun, you did it.
Yeah, it's huge. And we have come out on the wrong side of it. You'd think in recent times, the La Rochelle won, the Northampton won.
The Toulouse ones.
Toulouse, yeah. The All Blacks one obviously was the one that was very similar kind of feel to it. And it is important. The same way that it was important that Leinster won the URC at the end of the season. Like, winning is a habit, and you want to be on the right side of those. That will fill the Irish guys with belief, and that is, I know it was spoken about. Is it a positive thing or a negative thing that Farrell's doing the Lions, and we've got so many players there, and the summer tour, we're not going to be able to test ourselves the way the likes of France and Scotland and England have gone and done. But I think it has been a brilliant tour for Irish rugby, and Andy Farrell will have learned a lot himself. Like what he's learned from the likes of Finn Russell, that he'll be able to impart into Crowley and Prendergast. What the Irish players have learned from the likes of Tom Curry, and I think that's going to be really good for us. What's also important is that they get a good break. That has been a really, really long season. We've been lucky that not many Irish players have got injured. Obviously Hansen and McCarthy have had niggles, but they don't seem to be anything too bad. They may play this week, but the likes of Jac Morgan coming through, someone who's struggled over the years to put a long run of games together. That would have been my concern when Caelan was injured, but Jack has done that really well and has kept his usual consistent high level of performance. So I think,
how is it Jack goes back to being a sub on a club team now? It's insane.
Yeah,
just like the last line, sir. It must be a strange dynamic for his head, but that's another conversation. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, well, maybe my rule change comes in and he can play in the back row.
Okay. Yeah. Andy Farrell as well, Rory, and by all means circle back to the players, but even Farrell's scream, like very guttural. It was a long kind of 10-second scream. You could just a sense of the pressure that is on him, that this was a hiding to nothing. You don't win this series and you've got a lot of arrows coming at you from various directions. You got a glimpse, I think, more so than any of his interviews, of that the pressure, being a privilege and all that, but the pressure that is on him.
Yeah, just to jump back quickly to Jac Morgan, like we're always giving out in the media about players and doing it, bad interviews and stuff. I was chatting to him. It was an 8-minute masterclass. It was one of the best post-match interviews I've ever done. He was double-fisted, a can of Guinness in each hand. Like we asked him, well, how was that for you? And he instantly went back to a video Katie Taylor had sent to the squad on the Tuesday via Gary Keegan, and how it had inspired him, and how she told him to prepare to fight, to prepare to win with style, but be ready to win with grit. And that's what was in his head when they were 18 points down. And he was just brilliant. And if you could hear it when Joe Schmidt was talking. The MCG is 100,000 capacity stadium. It's magnificent. The press conference room is in the smallest space in between the two dressing rooms. So midway through the Lions press conference, the singing started up in the Lions dressing room, and you couldn't hear Andy Farrell. All you could hear was them singing "Rocking All Over the World," into "Gimme, Gimme, Gimme a Man Before Midnight," into "Dirty Old Town." And then Joe comes in and it's still going on. It hasn't stopped. And Joe was trying to talk about all this stuff really seriously. And it was just this faintly ridiculous thing of the Lions celebrating the room. Like Harry Wilson, I've never seen anyone look sadder. He just was like, to listen to the team that beat you. And like the Lions didn't know that they were in the press conference room. They weren't doing it out of spite. They were just having a brilliant time. And I think that sense of them having a brilliant time, the mix zone was planted right outside the dressing room. So we got to see them coming out. I presume everyone's seen this picture of them sitting in the center circle, which apparently it's an Australian cricket thing. They go out and they sit in the circle and they sing a song, and they start singing some songs, and then they got Keenan to run down to the corner and score a try, do it again, and they all cheered. And I think, this memory of what they've done here and the feeling that they've gotten in Australia, and Farrell will keep telling them, even though people will dismiss Australia and dismiss this as not being being a bit of a Lions light because of the way it's been, he will tell them over and over again, you've achieved history here. And if they go and win 3-0, he will make sure that they feel good about it. And I think going into the future with Ireland, that will be important, because confidence is so important. And I still think, even though Ireland won the Six Nations last year, I think the World Cup hangover has lasted nearly 2 seasons, and that team has looked a little bit leggy, a little bit weary of the fact that they had one mission in life, which was to win the World Cup in 23. It didn't work out, and they'd lost their purpose a little bit. And then the Lions has given them a new purpose and direction, and that's Farrell's skill. He's rejuvenated them. And I was trying to think, I'm going to do a piece on Saturday about it and how he built it all. And I'm trying to think, like, is it a better achievement than beating New Zealand in a 3-test series in 2022 with Ireland? Possibly not. Winning a Grand Slam with Ireland in the style that he did, with like 4 bonus point wins in 23. It's right up there, and I think personally he'll see it as his greatest achievement, because of he's pulling together the 4 teams, and he's come down here, and obviously they want to win. I think for him, it has to be 3-0. It has to be go unbeaten in Australia, and it has to be win with style. And they've managed the win with style element of it. I think what he wants now is an 80-minute performance to finish it all off. But that's going to be hard to do because they've been on the lash for 2 days.
Yeah, I'm told training and media obligations were cancelled today, Monday, because it's quote unquote recovery day. Is a euphemistic way of putting it. It's a difficult achievement. Yeah. It's a difficult achievement for you to rank, actually. I look forward to reading what conclusion you reach, because if they went out and played really well and won this again, kind of pulling up by 15 points, it doesn't feel like any kind of achievement. The achievement was to do it from 18 points down, the greatest comeback in Lions history, the crescendo of a last gasp try. It's memorable, it's emotional, we'll all remember the match. But as an achievement, therefore, it's almost receiving extra bonus points it might not warrant. You know, you could cynically sit down and say, well, they beat the 8th best team in the world and they put themselves in a bad position by not playing that well. It's difficult.
Yeah, I think they're up to 6 now, but I take your point. The Lions have never gone a series. I mean, the Argentina game has kind of ruined it for them, but they've never done a tour unbeaten in the modern age. I think you have to go back to 1927 Argentina for them to sweep the team or swept the team. And it's in 1800s for the last time they swept one of the 3 that they tour now. That was South Africa, and like that's incomparable. We're not talking about a similar size achievement. So yes, it's Australia, and much of it will come down to how the third test goes and how Australia pitch up and whether they can get Skelton and Valentini back on the pitch and where their motivation is and how much it's so like another example of rugby eating itself. Australia are playing at Ellis Park 6 days after the Lions tour, the Lions second test, or 7 days after the Lions second test. So Joe's already thinking about, okay, this is gone. I need to be ready for a rugby championship because we want to progress. But I think this has been such a national event since Saturday that they almost it's imperative on them to back up their performance and give something of it. And if we get another classic test on Saturday, that changes the way we look back on it again. But certainly, I know Farrell will frame it as you guys have achieved history. The way he spoke about it afterwards was his most kind of. He's been quite brief and terse with the media over here. I think the schedule has been a bit annoying for him, and having to talk to us 4 times a week hasn't helped that. But he was much more like 2023 World Cup Andy Farrell, you know, the this is living kind of attitude, and the way he spoke about how these guys all grew up wanting to be Lions. And can you imagine being a child watching that back at home? You want to be that as well. And I think that's the message he was giving to the team. And little things he's done as well, like getting that Katie Taylor video, that really resonated. Like Jack Conan was really emotional talking about it. Getting Martin Johnson in to talk to the team on the Thursday. The things that he does to build the togetherness between the group, and early on in the tour, I found it hard to gauge how together and how much they were enjoying it, because they were quite cocooned away from everything. But seeing them on Saturday night and being around them a little bit more the last week or two, it does seem like that they've built a really lasting connection. And in terms of an experience, it does seem like they're going to go home thinking this was a very special time. And you know, you see the former Lions in Australia a lot over here, like the 09 team have been around, and those guys are still so tight because of what they went through on that. It's that's important as well. Like that's not the kind of stuff we talk about from a players and a management point of view. That's important.
Yeah, Farrell's just exceptional at that. There's no two ways about it. And I mean, look, winning cures everything, but there did seem to be such a kind of warmth between the players full time, and a kind of shorthand and in jokes, and the way Hugh Jones spoke about Ringrose and his decision to pull out, and how he was gutted for him, and talked about how the centres have become so close in that tour. It does seem, and it's not surprising, that Farrell, you know, sensed how to bring a group together and make it feel really special for them, and like their dreams were coming true, and like it was the biggest game of their lives. And you know, he deserves immense credit for that. I saw Lawrence Delalio say that Dan Sheehan has been the best player on the pitch, both teams across the 2 games thus far. For you, which Irish guys have stood out and had great tours thus far?
I think across the board, like starting with the front row, the resurgence of Tadhg Furlong, when people were beginning to question, is he durable enough? He's refound his best form. It's been a very good tour for Porter. Sheehan's his record speaks for himself. Like he's just an incredible athlete. We're so lucky to have his quality, and you know, Kelleher behind him is also world class, and depth in Gus McCarthy there. I think Joe McCarthy really stepped up. Like questions about his discipline. You know, he maybe was learning from other players and saying, look, Joe, you're actually unbelievably tough to play against. You don't need to push for this extra couple of percent that's getting you in trouble. Ty Byrne, you know, what a big game player he was. Probably was suffering from a long season, but ultimately came to the first test and he was outstanding. Gibson Park is clearly the best number 9 in the British Isles, and I think Ireland's next World Cup hopes are. It's really important that we keep him fit and fresh. It's great that we've built a bit of depth with Casey in behind him. And then like similar kind of bracket, I'd put Bundy Aki. You know, can we keep him fit and fresh for the next World Cup? You know, he's probably the wrong side of 35 now. And then someone like Hugo Keenan, like people were questioning, will it be Daly? Will it be Kinghorn? A couple of things went his way, but that's sport. You know, you got to be available. Like that's the one thing.
He must be thinking like, my God, how talk about things falling your way. The two, Daly and Kinghorn at just the right time.
But that's sport. Like you get unlucky far more than you get lucky, in especially in rugby, like because it's so physical. And he made the decision to do the Olympics. It's, as did Dupont, and it worked out for Dupont. It didn't work out for Keenan. And I'd say he was looking at Osborne tearing up trees in South Africa, going, maybe I should have just held on to my spot here. Keenan will have some disappointments around the Champions Cup and some of his Six Nations performances. He is a really consistent performer, but he would fall into the bracket of falling on the wrong side of a lot of those defeats. I know, and it was a quality finish as well. It wasn't as simple as just getting it out to him. He's got that. It's a 2-on-2, and he's been brave enough to go, I'm going to stand him up here and I'm going to go for the outside here. Because by doing that, if you don't make it, there's a high likelihood you get turned over. Yeah. And it was great. I really enjoyed just seeing his bravery with that.
Between him and Jack Conan, it was like, which of us is going to make high six figures in the corporate sector over the next 20 years? Which of us is going to do it? I would like to. Give me the ball.
Yeah, exactly. And then Hansen has really refound his form. I know he hasn't played in the test, but he's had a brilliant series, and I think he's going to have a great duel with Tommy O'Brien going forward on that right hand side. But he's one of the best wingers at getting himself integrated into a back line high on the phase count. It's very hard to defend him, and he brings real energy to any team. So yeah, look, across the board, I think it's been a brilliant tour. I think someone who's probably been a little bit unlucky is Josh. You know, he's been arguably one of the best back rowers over the last 4 years. Was World Player of the Year. Tom Curry is exceptional, and Jac Morgan obviously gets a lot of press because he's Welsh, and full credit to him, a really good quality player. Could we see someone like Josh come in for the third test fresh? I'd really like to see it, and I think he deserves it as well.
Yeah. Rod, last one to you in Sydney as they build up to Saturday. Australia looking for revenge, Lions looking for a bit of history. Would you anticipate wholesale changes?
It's very hard to have a read on it at this time. I'm going to write a piece about it now, but I have no... they're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
They've been out for 2 days, so they'll kind of come back in tomorrow. But I'm sure Farrell has had a strategy mapped out for a while as to what he'd like to do. There was a theory at the start that he'd try and get all the players capped, you know, at some stage, but I don't see it. I don't see like Duhan, Van der Merwe, Marcus Smith coming back in. I think that's too big a risk, because I think the importance for them of winning the series is trumped by the importance of a clean sweep going 3-0. They've stated it. They've said it publicly. That's what they want to do. And it's a matter of who's kind of come out of that. Like Tom Curry has a wrist injury that needs attention, I think, and has played through that the whole way through. So does he come out to allow Josh in, or even Jac Morgan start with Josh coming onto the bench? Does Pollock get involved? Because Pollock just gives you so much energy as well.
I think so. I think Pollock's a great guy to bring in for a game like this. Just that youthful energy, and a back row of himself, Josh, Jack. I think that's a change that we could definitely see happening.
If Joe McCarthy's back, I think he'll play. There's an argument for James Ryan starting, and I didn't think Chesson went well. He missed a lot of tackles, James Ryan is very good playing against Will Skelton, who, in fairness to him, I've just before we came on the call, I was watching the game back. It's one of the funniest performances I've ever seen. The amount of niggle that guy brings to the table is just brilliant. He's smashing everyone late. He's coming out like the
Tyke Furlong
he
one.
drops a knee at the Tyke Furlong. He drops a knee onto a Toje. I mean, he's just the second row enforcer for the ages, and he just doesn't have an engine to go 80 minutes. But I'm sorry, he also carried brilliant. He did loads of really clever stuff. He's such a good player, and he added to the whole thing immensely. Because it was so nice until he arrived. Like, it was all boring and nice and vanilla, and suddenly this guy comes in and he's rattling the lines, and that's brilliant because they hadn't had their cages rattled. So there's scope for some change, but I don't think it'll be wholesale. I think Mac will play if he's fit, because I think the one I presume we haven't. I actually sent the text to the Lions media manager earlier to find out, and he hasn't got back to me. But Gary Ringrose, I don't know if he has to start the 12-day protocol again, having shown symptoms on the Thursday before the Saturday game, and if he does, that's him out. And even if he is fit, I don't know if they'd risk him or if he'd risk himself. But I'd love to see him get an opportunity to be a test lion, but obviously it has to be in the right circumstances. Jones was really. I thought there were nice quotes when he spoke about the whole exchange. But I mean, that's this. As much as he's getting loads of praise for pulling out, he must be so sad that his body hasn't played ball and his opportunity's been taken away from him. So
what age is he now, Rud?
Like 30. So yeah, like, I mean, he's young. He'll be younger than Bundy is now in 4 years' time. But Bundy's a physical freak. I'm not sure if Gary's like. A lot has to go right for him to arrive into New Zealand in 4 years' time and as good Nick as he is now. Especially the way he plays the game. So, it was special for James Ryan to get onto the pitch and play as well as he did, because he'd missed out in the last 2 tours. So he's now, and like loads of the English journalists were like, "Oh, why has he picked James? Oh, another Leinster lad," and he's come in and he's been brilliant. So, because the knives were out, like the knives were always going to be, they were never far from being out all through the tour. And the fact that they got it done means they've had to put them all back away in the press.
Okay, fellas, we will leave it there. Rory in Sydney and Ian Madigan closer to home. Thanks so much, guys. Great stuff.